In the opulent mansion, the ambient hum of the air conditioning mingled with the distant clinking of fine china. The sunlight streamed through the expansive windows, casting a golden glow on the lavish decor. Yet, amidst this luxury, a storm was brewing. James Harrison Jr., a teenager accustomed to the finest things life had to offer, lounged on a leather sofa, his eyes glued to a video game screen. His father, Charles Harrison, watched with a growing sense of frustration. Charles, a millionaire businessman with an iron will and a heart softened by years of hard work, had reached his breaking point. His son's arrogance and entitlement had pushed him to a decision he had been contemplating for months. Today, he would take a drastic step to teach James a lesson in humility. The door to the study creaked open, and Charles strode in, his demeanor stern and resolute. The room, adorned with trophies of his business successes, suddenly felt confining. He approached James with a purposeful stride, his face a mask of controlled anger. "James," Charles began, his voice cutting through the hum of the game, "I think it's time for you to learn a lesson about the real world." James barely looked up, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls. "What are you talking about, Dad? I'm in the middle of a game." Charles's patience snapped. "You're spending too much time in this fantasy world. You have no idea what real life is like, and it's about time you did." James finally paused the game and turned to face his father, a mix of curiosity and defiance in his eyes. "What are you going to do, ground me? I'm not a kid anymore." Charles took a deep breath, his resolve unshaken. "No, I'm not going to ground you. Instead, you're going to work with a street vendor for a month. You'll experience what it's like to earn every dollar the hard way. Consider it a punishment and a lesson in humility." The words hung in the air, a heavy declaration that seemed almost unreal to James. He blinked, struggling to process what he had just heard. "Work with a street vendor? Are you serious?" "Absolutely," Charles replied firmly. "You'll spend a month working with him, learning the value of hard work and the reality of life outside these walls. If you refuse, you'll lose access to your car, your allowance, and your precious gadgets." James's initial reaction was one of disbelief and anger. "You can't be serious. That's insane." Charles's expression didn't waver. "Consider it an opportunity to grow up. You'll start tomorrow. And let me be clear, this isn't a negotiation." With that, Charles turned on his heel and left the room, leaving James alone with his thoughts. The initial shock began to give way to a sense of dread. The luxurious bubble he had lived in was about to burst, and the stark reality of the streets awaited him. As James sat in the quiet aftermath, the weight of his father's ultimatum began to settle. The mansion, once a fortress of comfort, now felt like a gilded cage. The prospect of leaving this cocoon to face a world of hardship was daunting. James knew this was more than just a punishment. It was a challenge that would test him in ways he had never imagined. The next morning dawned with a stark contrast to the comfort James was used to. The city outside, with its bustling streets and hurried pace, seemed alien and unforgiving. James, dressed in clothes far removed from his usual designer wear, stepped out of the mansion and into the reality of his new world. The street vendor's corner was a far cry from the grandeur of his home. The makeshift stall, with its humble sign and an array of simple yet enticing food items, stood as a symbol of a life James had only seen from a distance. As he approached, the vendor, a weathered man with eyes that had seen much, looked up with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Welcome," the vendor said, his voice rough but not unkind. "I'm Sam. You must be James." James nodded, his pride and reluctance mingling in his demeanor. "Yeah, I'm here to work." Sam's gaze assessed him, and a knowing smile tugged at his lips. "Well then, let's see how well you adapt to the real world." As the first day began, James faced the reality of hard work. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the simple tasks of setting up the stall, interacting with customers, and handling money were a far cry from the virtual battles he was used to. Each task seemed to magnify his discomfort and resistance, highlighting the chasm between his former life and this new, demanding reality. The first light of dawn filtered through the narrow window of James's temporary apartment. The world outside was a cacophony of early morning sounds. The distant honking of cars, the chatter of vendors setting up their stalls, and the faint hum of the city awakening. James, still adjusting to his new reality, rolled out of the thin, uncomfortable bed with a groan. He dressed quickly in the simple clothes his father had bought for him, unremarkable jeans and a plain t-shirt. As he made his way to the street corner where Sam's vendor stall awaited, he couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment. The opulent life he had left behind seemed a distant memory, and the grittiness of the city streets was a stark reminder of the challenge ahead. The vendor's corner was already bustling with activity when James arrived. Sam, the vendor, was busy arranging items on the makeshift counter with practiced efficiency. The stall was a humble affair. A colorful awning shielded a collection of trays filled with food, each item carefully prepared and neatly presented. The smell of grilled meats and fresh vegetables filled the air, mingling with the city's own aromas. "Good morning, James," Sam said without looking up, his hands deftly arranging the condiments. "Ready for your first day?" James nodded, his enthusiasm lacking. "Yeah, I'm ready." Sam's eyes flicked up, studying James with a look of mild amusement. "You're not going to have a soft start here. We've got a busy day ahead." The first task was to help set up the stall, a chore that seemed deceptively simple. James struggled with the heavy crates of supplies, his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. Sweat began to bead on his forehead as he wrestled with the equipment, each lift and shift feeling like a test of endurance. His hands, used to the delicate handling of expensive gadgets, were now grappling with the rough textures of cardboard and metal. As the morning progressed, the challenges only grew. James had to learn to interact with customers, a skill that did not come naturally to him. The city's denizens, accustomed to the impersonal nature of street vendors, were skeptical of the well-to-do young man. Their curt responses and disinterested glances were a stark contrast to the polite, practiced conversations he was used to. "Can I get a hot dog?" a gruff voice demanded. James fumbled with the order, his hands shaking as he tried to prepare the food. The customer's impatient sigh was a piercing reminder of his inadequacy. Each mistake was met with a dose of criticism from Sam, who was unrelenting in his expectations. By noon, the sun blazed mercilessly overhead. James was drenched in sweat, his face flushed from the heat and exertion. The once challenging task of interacting with customers now seemed like a minor inconvenience compared to the physical toll of standing on his feet for hours and managing the relentless pace of the stall. The lunchtime rush was a whirlwind of activity. James found himself caught in a maelstrom of orders and demands. His earlier frustration gave way to a growing sense of overwhelm. Each customer seemed to add a new layer of complexity to his already stressful day. The once simple task of preparing food had become an intricate dance of multitasking, with each misstep drawing more ire from Sam. "Remember," Sam barked over the din of the crowd, "it's not just about serving food, it's about keeping your cool and managing the flow. The real challenge is staying composed when everything is falling apart." James took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The chaos of the stall, the heat of the grill, and the constant barrage of orders were a far cry from the controlled environment he was used to. He realized that adapting to this new world would require more than just physical endurance. It demanded a shift in mindset and a willingness to embrace discomfort. As the sun began to set and the crowd dwindled, James finally had a moment of respite. The once bustling street corner was now quiet, the energy of the day slowly fading into the evening calm. He sat on a nearby crate, his exhaustion palpable. The initial thrill of rebellion had long since faded, replaced by a dawning understanding of the hard work and resilience required in this new reality. Sam, wiping his hands on a rag, looked over at James with a mixture of approval and expectation. "You made it through your first day. It won't get easier, but if you stick with it, you might just learn something valuable." James nodded wearily, the weight of the day's experiences settling heavily on his shoulders. The harsh realities of his new world were becoming increasingly apparent, and the path to understanding and growth was still obscured by the challenges ahead. But as he prepared to head back to his temporary apartment, there was a glimmer of determination in his tired eyes. The city dawned with a dreary, overcast sky, hinting at a rain-soaked day ahead. James shuffled through the damp streets, the morning chill clinging to his skin as he made his way to the vendor stall. Yesterday's exhaustion had settled deep into his bones, but there was no reprieve from the daily grind. The familiar smell of grilled meat and sizzling vegetables greeted him as he approached the corner. Sam was already there, his weathered face set in its usual serious expression. "Morning," he said curtly, not looking up from arranging the trays. "Today's going to be different." James's heart sank. The prospect of another grueling day was daunting enough without the added promise of different. He nodded, bracing himself for whatever challenge awaited him. As the morning progressed, the hustle of the crowd and the demands of the stall intensified. James struggled with the constant flow of orders and the increasing difficulty of balancing multiple tasks. Each slip-up seemed magnified by Sam's unrelenting gaze. A spilled drink here, a burnt sausage there. James's mistakes were beginning to accumulate, each one met with a sharp reprimand. The tension reached a boiling point when a particularly irate customer, visibly frustrated by a delay, began to berate James. "Do you even know what you're doing? This is ridiculous." James's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. He tried to maintain his composure, but the customer's harsh words struck a nerve. "I'm doing my best," he snapped back, his voice rising in defiance. Sam's eyes narrowed as he stepped in. "Watch your tone, James. You're not just representing yourself. You're representing this stall and everyone who works here." The confrontation left James seething. He retreated to the back of the stall, where the sound of the city faded into a dull roar. He clenched his fists, struggling to contain his frustration. The weight of Sam's words and the pressure of the job were beginning to feel like an insurmountable burden. As the afternoon wore on, the rain began to fall, a steady drizzle that soon turned into a torrential downpour. The once bustling street was now a scene of chaos, with customers rushing for cover and the stall's makeshift awning barely holding up against the relentless downpour. The rainwater seeped through the edges, soaking everything in its path. James's spirits were as dampened as the surroundings. He felt like he was fighting a losing battle. The relentless downpour made the task of serving food nearly impossible. He slipped and slid on the wet pavement, his movements becoming increasingly frantic. Each attempt to manage the stall's operation seemed futile against the deluge. Sam, working alongside him with stoic determination, barely acknowledged the struggle. His focus was solely on ensuring that the stall remained operational despite the adverse conditions. James couldn't help but notice the vendor's unyielding resolve, even as the storm raged on. "Why don't you take a break?" Sam finally said, handing James a dry rag. "You're not helping anyone by pushing yourself to the limit." James accepted the rag, his hands trembling. He used the brief respite to collect his thoughts, looking around at the soggy mess that was once their stall. The rain pounded relentlessly, each drop a reminder of the adversity he faced. As he wiped down the counters and tried to salvage what he could, a realization began to dawn. The confrontation with the customer, the mounting pressure, and the relentless rain were all part of the same lesson. This was more than just a test of endurance. It was a crucible for resilience. When the rain finally began to ease, the street was left with a glistening sheen, reflecting the subdued glow of the streetlights. The once chaotic scene had quieted, and the evening's cool air brought a sense of calm. James, now soaked to the bone but resolute, continued his work with renewed determination. He faced the challenges head-on, each step a testament to his growing resolve. Sam, noticing the change, offered a rare nod of approval. "You're holding up better than I expected. Remember, it's not just about how you start, it's about how you finish." As the day came to a close, James's exhaustion was palpable. His clothes clung to him, and his muscles ached from the strain. But amidst the fatigue, there was a flicker of something new: resilience. The storm had not broken him. Instead, it had forged a new strength. Walking back to his apartment, James felt a shift within him. The challenges he faced had tested his limits, but they had also begun to shape him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The street, once a daunting labyrinth, now felt like a crucible of transformation. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, James felt a glimmer of hope. The confrontation and struggle had become stepping stones on a journey that was far from over. The real test, he knew, was not just surviving the challenges but emerging stronger and wiser from them. The city woke to a crisp, clear morning, the previous day's storm now a distant memory. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm, inviting glow over the bustling streets. James arrived at the vendor stall with a renewed sense of purpose, his muscles still aching from yesterday's trials, but his spirit slightly lifted. Sam was already at work, his movements efficient as he set up the stall for another day. James approached with a determined stride, ready to face whatever new challenges awaited him. However, as he began to help with the preparations, he noticed something different in Sam's demeanor, a hint of warmth that had been missing before. "Morning, James," Sam greeted him with a nod, a small smile playing on his lips. "Today's going to be a bit different." James raised an eyebrow, curious but guarded. "What do you mean?" "You'll see," Sam replied cryptically. The day began like any other, with a steady stream of customers approaching the stall. James was quickly absorbed in the familiar rhythm of serving food and handling orders. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice a young girl standing at the edge of the stall, her clothes tattered and her face smeared with dirt. She watched with wide eyes as customers came and went, clutching a small, empty cup. When the girl timidly approached the counter, Sam greeted her with a gentle smile. "What can I get for you today?" The girl hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. I don't have any money," she mumbled. Without a moment's hesitation, Sam handed her a warm sandwich and a bottle of water. "It's on the house," he said kindly. James watched in stunned silence as the girl's face lit up with gratitude. She clutched the food to her chest and mumbled a heartfelt "thank you" before scurrying away. The encounter left James with a profound sense of unease, as if the simplicity of the gesture had exposed something deep within him. The day wore on, and the interactions with customers were punctuated by more small acts of kindness from Sam. A free drink for a tired elderly man, a discount for a regular who was short on cash. Each gesture was delivered with a genuine warmth that seemed to transform the mundane task of running a stall into something more meaningful. As the afternoon approached, the stall grew quieter. The rhythm of the day slowed, allowing James some time to reflect. He had seen the impact of Sam's empathy firsthand, and it was beginning to resonate with him. The way Sam treated people, regardless of their circumstances, was a stark contrast to the detached, transactional interactions he was used to. James found himself contemplating the girl from earlier. The simplicity of her request and Sam's immediate response had created a ripple effect of compassion. He wondered how many people, like the girl, had walked away from that corner with a little bit of hope and a reminder of human kindness. When the stall finally began to close for the day, Sam pulled James aside. "I want you to understand something important," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "It's not just about selling food. It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone who walks through that door." James listened intently, the weight of Sam's words sinking in. "You mean, it's about more than just the transaction?" "Exactly," Sam replied. "It's about making a difference in people's lives, no matter how small. Empathy is what turns a simple act of service into something meaningful." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, James walked back to his temporary apartment with a new perspective. The day's experiences had challenged his understanding of what it meant to truly connect with others. The value of empathy, once a distant concept, now felt deeply personal. The city, bathed in the soft glow of twilight, seemed to hold a new significance. The interactions he had witnessed, the small acts of kindness, and the genuine connections made him reconsider his own approach to the world. The veneer of his previous life, with its wealth and privilege, now seemed shallow in comparison to the richness of human connection. As James settled into his apartment, he reflected on the day's lessons. The realization that empathy was not just an abstract concept but a tangible force capable of changing lives began to reshape his outlook. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but the journey was no longer just about enduring hardship. It was about embracing the deeper values that connected him to others. In the quiet of the evening, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. The value of empathy had become more than just a lesson. It was a guiding principle that would shape his interactions and experiences in the days to come. And with that understanding, he faced the future with a heart open to the possibilities of change and connection. The city's heartbeat quickened as the weekend approached, its streets filled with an energy that contrasted sharply with James's inner turmoil. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the vendor stall where James once again began his shift. The recent days had offered glimpses of personal growth, but today brought a different kind of challenge, one that wasn't as easily faced as the external struggles. Sam, always punctual and methodical, was already at work. The usual routine was punctuated by a feeling of heaviness that clung to James. His internal struggles, once pushed aside by the demands of the job, had now come to the forefront. The simple act of setting up the stall seemed to be an exercise in maintaining a facade of normalcy. As James worked, he found himself lost in thought. The physical labor of running the stall was now familiar, but the emotional weight of his new reality was beginning to take its toll. He thought about his previous life, the luxury, the comfort, the ease. The contrast between that life and the harsh reality of his current existence seemed to grow starker with each passing day. The stall grew busier as the day progressed, the steady influx of customers demanding James's attention. He threw himself into his work, hoping to distract himself from his mounting feelings of inadequacy. But with each new order, the internal conflict simmered beneath the surface, threatening to disrupt his focus. The first real test came when a group of teenagers approached the stall, their laughter and boisterous energy a sharp contrast to James's subdued mood. They placed their orders with a carefree attitude, and James struggled to keep up with their quick, overlapping requests. His hands moved with increasing clumsiness, each mistake a reminder of his growing frustration. "Hey man, you need to get it together," one of the teenagers said with a hint of mockery. "This isn't rocket science." The comment struck James like a blow. He tried to keep his composure, but the sting of the words and the pressure of the job were becoming overwhelming. The teenagers' laughter as they walked away felt like a personal affront, exacerbating his internal struggle. As the day wore on, James's frustration grew into self-doubt. The constant comparison between his previous life and his current struggles began to weigh heavily on him. He found himself questioning whether he was truly capable of handling this new reality. The sense of failure was all-consuming, clouding his thoughts and affecting his interactions. When Sam took a brief break, James seized the opportunity to voice his concerns. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he admitted, his voice tinged with despair. "I feel like I'm failing at everything." Sam looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and sternness. Failure isn't about not succeeding. It's about not trying to understand the lessons that come with it. You're not just facing external challenges. You're confronting your own fears and insecurities. The vendor's words cut through James's self-pity. They were a reminder that the struggles he faced were not just about the physical demands of the job, but also about confronting his own limitations and fears. It was a harsh but necessary revelation. As the day drew to a close and the stall emptied, James took a moment to reflect on the confrontation with his inner struggles. The physical exhaustion of the day was palpable, but it was the emotional strain that left him feeling drained. The contrast between the outward appearance of his work and the inner battle he faced was stark and disheartening. Walking back to his apartment, the city lights seemed to blur with the haze of his thoughts. The weight of his internal struggles was becoming more evident, and the sense of inadequacy was a heavy burden. The path ahead was unclear, but the journey was beginning to feel like a test not just of endurance but of self-discovery. James's steps were slow and deliberate, each one a testament to his inner conflict. The once familiar streets now felt like a labyrinth of challenges, both external and internal. He knew that the journey ahead would require not only physical strength but also a deeper understanding of himself. In the quiet of his apartment, James sat in solitude, reflecting on the day's events. The external challenges were manageable, but the internal struggles were proving to be a formidable opponent. The journey was far from over, and the path to self-discovery and resilience seemed both daunting and essential. As the city outside continued its rhythm, James faced the reality of his inner battles with a newfound resolve. The struggle was not just about overcoming obstacles, but about understanding and embracing the personal growth that came from facing his deepest fears and insecurities. The journey of transformation was ongoing, and with each step, James moved closer to a deeper understanding of himself and his place in the world. The morning light filtered through the narrow windows of James's apartment, casting long, gentle shadows on the floor. The city outside had awakened to a new day, but James remained ensnared in his thoughts, the weight of the previous day's self-doubt heavy on his shoulders. Today, the air felt different, charged with a sense of expectation that James couldn't quite place. At the vendor stall, the atmosphere was calm, almost serene, as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The routine was familiar, setting up the stall, preparing the food, greeting the first customers, but today carried an undercurrent of change. Sam, as always, was focused and methodical, his demeanor a stark contrast to the turbulence James felt inside. As the morning progressed, James worked mechanically, his movements automatic but his mind elsewhere. The usual rhythm of the stall seemed almost hypnotic, lulling him into a state of introspection. It was during this lull that an unexpected visitor arrived, a woman in her mid-40s with an air of quiet determination. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the stall with a thoughtful expression. "Do you have any leftover bread?" James was caught off guard. "Leftover bread? We usually don't keep it." The woman nodded, seemingly prepared for this. "I'm looking to feed a small group of people who are in need. I understand if you can't help, but I thought I'd ask." The request was simple, yet it struck a chord with James. He glanced at Sam, who, without a word, handed over a bag of bread and a few extra portions of food. "Give this to them," Sam said, his voice soft but firm. James watched as the woman left, her face brightening with gratitude. She offered a heartfelt "thank you" before disappearing into the crowd. The encounter left James with a profound sense of unease and curiosity. As the day continued, James found himself absorbed in thought. The woman's request and Sam's response had stirred something deep within him. The act of giving, so effortlessly carried out by Sam, was a stark contrast to James's internal struggles. It was as if the simplicity of the gesture had exposed a profound truth about the nature of generosity and self-worth. When the lunch rush subsided and the stall became quieter, James sought out Sam, hoping to gain some insight into the day's events. "Why did you give her the bread? It seemed like such a small thing, but it had a big impact." Sam looked up from his work, his eyes thoughtful. "It's not always the grand gestures that matter. Sometimes, it's the small acts of kindness that make the biggest difference." James pondered this as he continued with his tasks. The stall, once just a place of work, was beginning to feel like a crucible of personal transformation. Each interaction, each gesture, seemed to hold a deeper significance. The revelation that small acts of kindness could create ripples of change began to resonate with him. As the afternoon light began to wane, casting a golden glow over the city, James took a moment to reflect on the lessons of the day. The previous struggles with self-doubt and inadequacy were beginning to shift into a broader understanding of what it meant to contribute meaningfully to the lives of others. The act of giving, no matter how small, had revealed a new perspective on value and connection. Walking back to his apartment as dusk settled over the city, James felt a shift within himself. The day's experiences had provided him with a clearer sense of purpose. The simple act of kindness he had witnessed was not just about the bread or the food. It was about recognizing the impact of empathy and generosity on both the giver and the receiver. The city, now bathed in the soft hues of evening, seemed to hold a new significance. Each street and corner felt like a part of a larger tapestry of human connection. The struggle and reflection had opened James's eyes to a deeper understanding of himself and his role in the world. As he settled into his apartment, the weight of the day's revelations settled into his thoughts. The journey of self-discovery was ongoing, and each experience, no matter how small, was shaping his understanding of what it meant to live with purpose and empathy. The path ahead was still uncertain, but James faced it with a newfound clarity. In the quiet of the evening, as the city's lights flickered to life, James felt a sense of calm resolve. The revelations of the day had provided a new lens through which to view his journey. A journey not just of overcoming challenges, but of embracing the deeper values that connected him to the world around him. The city's hum was a constant companion as James navigated the labyrinth of streets on his way to the stall. The early morning air was brisk, and the shadows of the buildings stretched long and thin, as if hesitant to embrace the full light of day. Inside James's apartment, the night had been restless. The echoes of his recent revelations haunted his thoughts, swirling around his mind like a storm. As he arrived at the vendor stall, the familiar scene greeted him. Sam already at work, setting up with his usual efficiency. But today, there was a palpable tension in the air, as if the city itself was holding its breath. James could feel it, a gnawing sense of unease that seemed to seep into every corner of his consciousness. The day started like any other, with the steady stream of customers filtering through. James forced himself to focus on his tasks, the rhythm of serving and preparing almost mechanical. Yet, his thoughts were a tangled mess, pulled in different directions by the weight of his recent realizations and the pressures of his current situation. It was during the lunch rush, amidst the clamor of voices and the sizzle of the grill, that the crisis hit. A loud commotion erupted from the street, a clash of voices and the sharp sound of shattering glass. James looked up, his heart racing as he saw a small crowd gathering nearby, the scene unfolding like a grim tableau. Sam, sensing James's alarm, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay here, I'll check it out." James nodded, his mind racing. He watched as Sam moved swiftly through the crowd, his figure quickly swallowed by the chaos. The stall, once a refuge from the city's harshness, now felt like a cage, trapping James in his own turmoil. The minutes ticked by like hours. James's thoughts spiraled into a vortex of anxiety and doubt. What if Sam needed help? What if this was a turning point in their journey? The unease settled heavily on his shoulders, and he found himself grappling with the weight of his own fears and uncertainties. The commotion eventually subsided, and Sam returned, his expression grave. A local business was vandalized. The police are handling it, but it was a rough situation. There's a lot of tension in the air. James's relief was short-lived, quickly overshadowed by the realization of how fragile the peace had been. The incident was a stark reminder of the instability that lurked just beneath the surface of everyday life. The feeling of safety he had clung to now seemed tenuous and elusive. Sam, noting James's troubled expression, spoke softly. "Sometimes, situations like these force us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities. It's a chance to make decisions that define who we are." James's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The safe route was to retreat, to cling to the comfort of familiarity. But the recent revelations about empathy and kindness had already begun to reshape his perspective. The crisis forced him to confront the reality of his situation, not just as a challenge to endure but as a pivotal moment of decision. As the day turned to evening, the city's rhythm seemed to carry a new intensity. The events of the day had cast a shadow over James's sense of purpose. He found himself at a crossroads, caught between the allure of returning to his former life of ease and the call to embrace the deeper values he had begun to understand. Sam's words echoed in his mind, a guiding light through the darkness of his uncertainty. The crisis had revealed the fragility of his current existence, but it had also presented an opportunity to make a choice that would shape the course of his journey. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, James stood alone in the quiet of the now empty stall. The city's noise had faded to a distant murmur, leaving him with his thoughts. The decision before him was daunting, but the path was clear. It was a choice between retreating into the safety of the familiar or stepping into the unknown with the lessons he had learned. With a deep breath, James resolved to face the challenge head-on. The crisis had tested his resolve, but it had also illuminated the path forward. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, fraught with uncertainty and risk, but it was a road he was now ready to travel. In the dim light of the evening, as the city settled into its nightly rhythm, James embraced the weight of his decision. The journey of transformation had reached a critical juncture, and with newfound determination, he was prepared to navigate the challenges ahead with the courage and conviction he had discovered within himself. The morning sky was a blanket of gray, heavy with the promise of rain. James trudged through the damp streets toward the stall, his steps echoing in the quiet of the early hours. The recent days had been a whirlwind of emotions and decisions, each moment adding weight to his already burdened soul. The city, wrapped in its own somber hue, seemed to mirror his internal struggle. The vendor stall, once a place of routine, now felt like a battleground of sorts. As James arrived, he found Sam preparing for the day, his face set in a determined expression. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the events of the past days hanging heavily over their interactions. The morning passed with a familiar rhythm, but James's mind was far from the usual tasks. He was absorbed in a deep internal struggle, the recent crisis and his decision weighing heavily on him. The incident had exposed the vulnerability of their situation, and James felt an overwhelming need to act, to make a meaningful impact in a world that seemed increasingly uncertain. It was during a brief lull that a familiar figure appeared at the stall, the woman from a few days ago, the one who had asked for leftover bread. She approached with a look of concern etched on her face. "I hope I'm not intruding," she began, "but I heard about the recent trouble. Are you all right?" James, taken aback by her concern, managed a weary smile. "We're getting by. Thank you for asking." Her eyes softened as she looked at him. "I wanted to thank you for the bread you gave us. It helped more than you know. My community is struggling, and every bit of help makes a difference." James's heart twisted at her words. The realization of the impact of his actions, however small they seemed, was profound. The bread had been a simple gesture, but it had resonated far beyond its immediate value. The woman's gratitude was a stark reminder of the potential for small acts of kindness to ripple through the lives of others. As the day wore on, James's thoughts were consumed by the idea of making a greater impact. The sense of urgency was palpable, a driving force that pushed him beyond his comfort zone. He knew that to truly embrace the lessons he had learned, he needed to take a step that went beyond mere gestures. The opportunity came in the form of a community event organized to aid those affected by the recent unrest. The event was in need of volunteers, and James saw it as a chance to contribute in a meaningful way. Despite his initial hesitations, he signed up, driven by a sense of responsibility and a desire for redemption. The evening of the event arrived, and James found himself among a sea of volunteers, all united in their effort to support those in need. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of camaraderie and purpose, and James threw himself into the work with renewed vigor. The tasks were varied, serving food, distributing supplies, and offering support, but each one was a step toward making a tangible difference. As the night deepened, the rain that had threatened earlier began to fall, adding a layer of challenge to the already demanding work. But instead of feeling defeated, James felt a sense of exhilaration. The rain-soaked volunteers worked side by side, their efforts illuminated by the glow of streetlights and the warmth of their shared purpose. The event was a success, and as the final hours approached, James felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The sacrifice of his time and effort had been a small price to pay for the impact he had witnessed. The gratitude of those he had helped, the smiles, and the words of appreciation were a balm for his soul. As the rain subsided and the city began to quiet down, James walked back to the stall, the weight of his earlier struggles now tempered by a newfound sense of purpose. The redemption he had sought through his actions had not come easily, but it was deeply satisfying. The journey of self-discovery and sacrifice had revealed a deeper understanding of what it meant to give and to receive, to contribute meaningfully to the world around him. In the stillness of the night, as the city settled into its routine, James felt a profound shift within himself. The sacrifices he had made were not just about personal redemption, but about embracing the broader impact of his actions. The road ahead was still uncertain, but the journey had brought him closer to a sense of fulfillment and connection. As he prepared for another day at the stall, James carried with him the lessons of sacrifice and redemption. The path had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. With each step, he was moving closer to a deeper understanding of his role in the world and the impact he could make. The city was shrouded in a heavy fog that morning, its usually vibrant streets muted under a blanket of gray. James walked through the mist with purpose, each step echoing the resolve he felt inside. The time had come for a decisive confrontation, a moment that would test everything he had learned and every change he had embraced. As James approached the vendor stall, he could feel the tension in the air. The events of the past weeks had led to this point, a culmination of personal growth and external challenges. The stall was quieter than usual, a stark contrast to the bustling activity of earlier days. Sam was already there, his presence calm and reassuring amidst the uncertainty. "James," Sam greeted, his tone steady. "We need to talk." James nodded, sensing the gravity of the moment. They walked to a quieter corner of the street, away from the prying eyes of customers and passers-by. The fog enveloped them, creating a sense of isolation that matched the intensity of their conversation. "I've been thinking," James began, his voice steady but reflective, "about everything that's happened, the challenges, the sacrifices, and what's left to do." Sam listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "I've seen you grow through all of this, but there's one last hurdle we need to face." James raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Sam took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. "The city is facing more unrest. There's talk of a major protest against the economic disparity that's been growing. It's an opportunity to stand up for what we've learned, to make a real difference. But it's going to be dangerous." The weight of Sam's words settled heavily on James. The protest was more than just a public demonstration. It was a flashpoint of deep-seated issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. The decision to participate meant stepping into a situation fraught with risk and uncertainty. James's mind raced as he considered the implications. The recent revelations about empathy and sacrifice had brought him to this crossroads. The choice was clear. He could continue to stay within the safety of his current role or step into the fray to address the larger issues at hand. The fog seemed to lift slightly as the decision crystallized in James's mind. He had come too far to retreat now. The lessons of empathy and sacrifice had prepared him for this moment. It was time to confront the challenges head-on and stand up for the values he had come to embrace. With a determined nod, James turned to Sam. "Let's do it. I'm ready." The protest was a powerful display of collective frustration and demand for change. As James and Sam joined the throngs of demonstrators, the atmosphere was electric, charged with a mix of anger, hope, and resolve. The city's streets, usually a backdrop to their daily routines, had transformed into a battleground of ideals and aspirations. James marched with a sense of purpose, his heart pounding in sync with the rhythm of the crowd. The roar of voices and the sight of banners calling for justice filled him with a profound sense of connection to the larger struggle. The confrontation was not just with the external forces of unrest, but with his own fears and doubts. The protest escalated as tensions rose, and the atmosphere became increasingly volatile. James found himself at the center of the action, his role evolving from participant to mediator. The skills he had developed, his ability to empathize, his understanding of sacrifice, became crucial in navigating the chaos and finding a way to channel the collective energy into constructive dialogue. Amidst the turmoil, James and Sam worked tirelessly to de-escalate confrontations, offer support to those in need, and ensure that the message of the protest was heard without descending into violence. It was a test of their resolve, their ability to maintain their values in the face of intense pressure. As the day wore on, the fog began to lift, both literally and metaphorically. The protest reached its peak, and a sense of cautious optimism began to emerge. The voices of the people had been heard, and the demonstration had sparked important conversations about change and justice. James stood amidst the crowd, his heart heavy but hopeful. The confrontation had been intense and challenging, but it had also been a powerful affirmation of the values he had come to hold dear. The journey had led him to this pivotal moment, a convergence of personal growth and public action. As the evening approached and the crowd began to disperse, James felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The final confrontation had been a crucible of sorts, a moment that tested his commitment and courage. The lessons of empathy, sacrifice, and resolve had guided him through the chaos, and he emerged with a deeper understanding of his role in the world. In the fading light of the day, as the city slowly returned to its routine, James knew that the journey was far from over. The confrontation had been a crucial step, but it was also a beginning, a chance to continue advocating for change and making a difference in the world around him. The city awoke with a renewed energy as dawn broke, its skyline bathed in a warm, golden light. James stood by the window of the small apartment he had come to cherish, watching the world come alive. The recent days had been a whirlwind of change, and the quiet morning offered a moment of reflection amidst the bustle. The events of the past weeks, the protests, the sacrifices, and the confrontation, had left an indelible mark on him. James had weathered the storm of uncertainty and emerged with a profound understanding of himself and the world around him. The journey had been arduous, but it had forged a new path forward, one that promised growth and transformation. As he prepared for the day, James glanced around the modest apartment, now filled with personal touches that spoke of a new chapter in his life. The transformation was not just physical but deeply emotional. The once aloof and detached young man had become someone who embraced empathy, sacrifice, and genuine connection. Sam had been a steadfast companion through this journey, their bond solidified by shared experiences and mutual respect. Together, they had faced the challenges head-on and come out stronger. Their conversations and collaborative efforts had been a source of strength and inspiration, and now it was time to move forward. The city's streets, once a battleground of ideals and aspirations, now felt like a canvas of possibilities. James made his way to the vendor stall, a place that had become a symbol of his transformation. Each step felt lighter, imbued with a sense of purpose and optimism. At the stall, Sam greeted him with a warm smile, his eyes reflecting the changes in their shared journey. "Morning, James. Ready for the day?" James returned the smile, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "Ready. Let's see what today brings." The morning unfolded with a renewed sense of purpose. The vendor stall, once a place of mere survival, had become a hub of community and connection. James and Sam worked side by side, their interactions with customers marked by genuine engagement and a shared commitment to making a difference. As the day progressed, a group of community members gathered at the stall, eager to discuss ways to continue the momentum from the recent protests. The conversations were vibrant and constructive, focused on creating lasting change and fostering a sense of unity. James found himself at the heart of these discussions, his voice contributing to the vision of a more equitable and empathetic community. The ideas flowed freely, each suggestion building on the lessons learned from their collective experiences. It was a testament to the transformation that had taken place, not just within James but in the community as a whole. The sense of camaraderie and collaboration was palpable. The vendor stall had evolved into a symbol of hope and renewal, a place where ideas and actions intersected to create tangible change. James felt a deep sense of pride and fulfillment as he witnessed the impact of their efforts. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city, James took a moment to reflect. The transformation he had undergone was profound, reshaping his understanding of himself and his role in the world. The journey had been challenging, but it had led to a new beginning, one filled with possibilities and a renewed sense of purpose. With the day's work coming to a close, James and Sam stood together, their faces illuminated by the soft light of the evening. The city, now vibrant and alive with the promise of change, seemed to welcome them into its fold. James looked at Sam, his eyes reflecting the journey they had shared. "Thank you for everything. This has been a transformative experience, and I'm grateful for your support." Sam nodded, a smile of genuine warmth on his face. "We've come a long way, James. It's been an honor to be part of this journey with you." As the last light of day faded, James felt a profound sense of closure and anticipation. The road ahead was still unfolding, but the lessons of transformation and new beginnings had set him on a path of meaningful change. In the quiet of the evening, James looked out over the city, a renewed sense of purpose filling his heart. The journey had been arduous, but it had led to a place of understanding and growth. As the city continued to buzz with life, James felt ready to embrace the future with hope and determination. The transformation was complete, and a new beginning awaited. The challenges of the past had paved the way for a future filled with promise and possibility. With each step, James was ready to face the world with a heart full of empathy and a commitment to making a difference. Click on the video being recommended to you now.